Hi kids, my name is Jim Pence and welcome to the Joy of Art. We're going to have fun today. That's the first rule I have in any art class that I teach. You've got to have fun because that's what art is all about. Expressing yourself and just enjoying creating and looking at this beautiful world that God has created and putting it onto paper. Now today we're going to be doing something called mixed media. You know, a lot of times when people paint or draw, they'll just do one thing. They'll do maybe oils, or they'll do watercolors, or they'll draw with pencils or chalk or whatever. Well, mixed media means you're using 2 or 3 different kinds of things and putting them into one picture. So today we're going to work with watercolors, we're going to work with pen and ink, and we're going to work with some fluorescent crayon. And that's the best part because at the end of the picture you can turn on a black light and really surprise your friends with something that they didn't see before. So we're going to have a good time, and remember, your picture may not look exactly like mine, but that's okay. This is your time to create, to have fun. So let's look at what we're going to need to do this picture today. Now first, when you're working with watercolors, you need a lot of water, okay? And the reason you need a lot of water is because as you clean your brushes out, the water's going to get dirty and messy, and if you're working with dirty water, then it's just going to muddy up your painting. So you always want to have 2 containers of water. I like to use gallon-sized jugs. Maybe if mom and dad get milk, just have them save a couple of the jugs and then just cut off the top of the jug like that and leave the handle there. And then you've got 2 really good containers. One of these is going to be for clean water, and one is going to be for dirty water, okay? So that when we clean our brushes out, we're always going to use the same jug to clean that brush. And that way we'll have one that's dirty, and then whenever we need clean, fresh water, we can come over here. Second thing we're going to need is some paper towel, okay? And the paper towel is to blot our brush out. When you're doing watercolors, again, sometimes you want a whole lot of water, and sometimes you want just a little bit of water. And so we use the paper towel to blot those brushes out when we just want a little bit of water. You're going to need some watercolor paper. Okay, I have a little pad here. You can buy these at just about any store. And the main thing with watercolor paper is it's thick and heavy. Okay, regular drawing paper won't work real well for this because when we work on it, we're going to get a lot of water into this paper so that it won't dry fast on us. And so you want a good thick paper, and again, you can find pads that will say watercolor paper on them, and so you want to just get a pad of that. You're going to need some brushes, okay? This brush is called a round, and you can find them again at an arts and crafts store. This is a pretty big one because we're going to want to put a lot of color on the paper. Brushes come in a lot of different sizes. Today we need a pretty big one because we don't need a lot of detail. You're going to want a pencil. Okay? A pencil is just to sketch out your picture before you start working with the pen and ink. And that's because if you do a sketch first, then if you make a mistake or you do something that you don't like, you can always go in and erase it and redo it. You're going to need a fluorescent crayon. Okay, you can get those. We have here a whole set of extreme colors, and I'm just going to be using one today, Lemon Glacier. So you'll need that. That'll be for the very end of the picture. You need something to put a lot of water on the paper at one time. This is just a craft brush, or it's actually a craft foam brush. It's not even a regular brush, but this, like a sponge, will soak up a lot of water. We'll be able to get that paper nice and wet. And then you're going to need some permanent markers, okay? Be sure that they are permanent. They're not water-based markers, because if you use a water-based marker and it doesn't say permanent on it, then when you add water to this picture, it's going to make that smear. So I have 2 here. One is a fine point, and then one has a great big broad point, and that's because the fine point we'll use to put in our detail. The broad point one, we're going to cover a lot of area, and this just makes it go a little faster. Okay, you'll need a pair of scissors because we're going to cut our paper into half size, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then of course you're going to need some watercolors. You can just go to the store and buy a set. These don't cost more than a few dollars. And this is a set of 16 different colors. You can buy them in a set of 8. You can buy them in a set really of 24. Just depends on how much money you want to spend. But I like the 16 because it gives me a little bit more variety and a few more colors to choose from. Now today the picture that we're going to work on is very simple, 3 crosses on a hill. And we're going to have a really pretty sunset in the background, and then a big hill in the front, and then we're going to add some fluorescent effects. And one last thing that you'll need is a black light. I've got a see the light black light here, and if you don't have that, you can't see that invisible hidden picture. But with this, you'll be able to turn out the lights after you've finished and show your friends the surprise that we're going to hide in that picture. So let's get to work with some watercolor and mixed media fun. Now, the size pad that I got is 9 by 12. That's a little bit larger than a regular sheet of paper. And what we're going to do to make it a little bit easier is we're going to use a half-size sheet. Now, the easiest way, and what I usually do, is I'll just take a sheet, I'm going to fold it in half, I'm going to make sure the edges meet nicely, and I'm going to just press it down. And because this paper is stiff, it's pretty easy to just fold it back and forth. And if you fold it enough times, you really don't even need scissors. You can pretty much just tear it. If you want to use scissors so that the edge is a little bit better, be sure and do that. But again, what I will usually do is I'll just take the edge and I'm going to tear the edge a little bit. Then I'm going to put it flat on the paper. I'm going to hold one side down with my hand and very gently pull away. And as I pull away, then I have a nice half-size sheet. That's just a little easier to work with. I'm going to put the other paper aside because I won't need that. And the first thing that we're going to do is draw our crosses and our hill on the paper. Now, to do that, I'm going to start with my fine point Sharpie. Now, you might want to use a pencil at this point. Okay, I'm going to use the Sharpie so it's easier for you to see, but a pencil will give you a chance to sketch it out, and again, if you make a mistake, then you can erase it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie, and for starters, I'm just going to draw kind of a rough line. It doesn't have to be straight, it doesn't have to be fancy. I'm just going to draw a kind of a rocky, bumpy bump right there, about 1/3 of the way up my paper. And that's my hill. That was easy. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the broad point and I'm going to fill in that hill and make it dark. So the place that I want to be a little careful is when I'm right up close to the line. And again, because this is a rough line, it really doesn't even matter if I make a mistake. If I go over the line, well, I'll just make that a new rock. So I'm going to go all the way around on that line for starters. Now, one thing that you also might want to keep in mind while you're working at home is if you're working like on your dining room table or on a kitchen counter, you might want to put something underneath, like a piece of cardboard, or if you have a piece of wood. This is a nice artist's drawing board that I've got here. But if you're working with a permanent marker, then if you happen to just be working on a table and you go over the edge of your paper, it's going to put a mark on that table that isn't going to come out very easily. So what you want to do is make sure you have something under the paper that you're working on, and then again, just follow all the way around. And once you've done that, we want to fill in the rest of this bottom section completely black. So this is going to take a few minutes, so you may want to pause the DVD at this point and go do this yourself, because there's a lot of area to cover. All right, I've got my hill colored in, and I hope you have too. So we have the first part of our picture done. Now I'm going to put away my broad point, and I'm going back to my sharp point marker. And we're going to draw in 3 crosses. We're going to start with the middle one, and I'm just going to do some straight lines down. I want this to come up a little over another 1/3 of the page. And if you can watch what I'm doing, I'm just drawing some lines one after another pretty close together. You can use a ruler if you want to, but I like a rough look because, you know, the cross that Jesus died on was made out of, you know, pretty rough wood. They didn't polish it and make it really nice. And so I like the extra little roughness that just using my hand makes. I'm going to come across, I'm going to do the crossbar. I'm going to start here and just come straight across. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can. And as you bring that out, we have our first cross. Main thing, you want to try to have the two sides about the same length. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to get rid of the little bit of white that's showing through there. Okay, so we have our first cross. You know, I remember years ago hearing a line from a poem that said, "He was crucified upon a cross of wood and made the hill on which it stood." And so, you know, as you think of that, you realize that Jesus died on that cross for us, but he was the one who created the very hill and the very wood that he died on. That's how much he loved us. Now, the scriptures tell us that Jesus was crucified between two thieves, so there we have to put two other crosses up there. Now, what I'm going to do, a lot of times when people do this, they'll just do three crosses that look just like this one. But to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to put this one cross down here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than I made Jesus's cross, because they weren't right next to each other. They were close enough that Jesus was able to talk to the men on the other crosses, because we know that one of the men came to faith and believed in Jesus right from the cross. I'm going to draw that, and I'm going to make my line a little bit tilted. I'm going to tilt it down at kind of an angle, okay? And when I do that, it just gives it a little bit more interest, okay? It makes it look a little nicer and sort of gives you a different feel. Now I'm going to come over here on this side and I'll do the third cross. And again, I'm going to try to make it about the same height as the one on the other side. Just going to draw some lines here. And it's not exact, but it's close. I'm going to make the bottom a little bit thicker. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to make that just a little bit taller. I'm going to make this line go down that way. So they're both kind of pointing a little bit down toward the ground. And so I have three crosses at three different angles. Now, again, if you've done this in pencil first to practice and get it the way you want it, then you're going to want to go back over it and make sure that it's all covered in marker. So you may want to take a minute or two and pause the DVD and do that part. And then it's going to be time for us to get our watercolors out. Now when you buy a set of watercolors, most of the time it will have a brush included, but the brushes that come with the watercolors, these pan sets, are usually not very good. And so for the most part, when those come, you really don't want to use them. You want to buy a good brush that's going to have nice bristles on it and is going to be able to do what you want it to. Now the first thing with watercolors, we've got to get the water. And I'm going to use my foam brush here. The reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to be able to come over this picture and get it very wet very fast, okay? So that's why you want something about this wide. This is a 2-inch brush, and then you have to decide which one is going to be the clean one and which one is going to be the dirty one. I'm going to reach into the one closest to me to be my clean water. I'm also going to move my blotter over just a little bit closer to that, because that's where I will be needing to get excess water off. All right, I have that pretty wet. I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to start brushing right along, and I want to get this nice and wet. If you don't get it wet and good and dripping almost, then what happens is the paper will start to dry while you're still working on it, and your colors won't mix the way that you want them to. So what we want to do is get it nice and wet. It is going to curl a little bit, and that's one of the reasons that I had you cut your sheet in half, because the bigger the sheet of paper, the more it's going to curl while you get it wet, and it's a little easier to manage a small sheet. Okay, I've got this pretty wet. You can tell when you see the lights in your ceiling reflecting off of it that it's pretty wet. So this is good. Now what we're going to do is work pretty fast. That's the other thing with watercolors, is if you go too slow with what we're doing here, then again the paper will dry and you just won't get the color mix that you want. So we're going to make a sunset. We're going to need 3 colors for that. We're going to need a blue, we're going to need a yellow, and we're going to need some red. Now the reason we put the red in, if you've ever mixed colors before, you know that yellow and blue mixed together make green. And I've lived a long time, but I've never seen a green sunset. So what we have to do is we're going to have the blue up at the top, and we're going to have the yellow down here where the sun is right behind the hill, but we want a little bit of red in between those two so that the yellow and the blue don't mix together and make green, because you'll see in a minute that if we don't do that, then the colors are going to run together and you're going to have a mess. So what I'm doing right now is I'm putting a little water on my blue, putting a little water on my yellow, just clean water, and I'm putting a little clean water on the red. Okay, now I'm going to come over here to my blotter. I'm going to get that extra water off of there. Okay, and I'm going to come first into the yellow. Okay, I'm going to work with the yellow really quick. And I'm going to stir it up here. And remember, you want to work fast. I want the sun kind of right behind where Jesus' cross is, so I'm going to put a lot of yellow in there. I just keep coming back, dipping in. And the nice thing and the fun thing with watercolors and doing skies is you can make really pretty dramatic skies very easily. You just put the colors on, and in a minute I'll show you how to pick the paper up and let the colors blend themselves. But we're going to get some yellow in there. Okay, now I'm going to go over to my dirty water jar. I'm going to clean that brush out. Just shake it really good. I'm going to come down here and blot it. And when I blot, I look to see if any color is coming off, because if there's color coming off, then I need to go back in and do that again. Okay, so I've done that. Now I'm going to come in with my red real quick. Okay, I'm not going to use a lot of red, but I'm going to just splash some in there, just like that. Okay, just enough to keep the yellow and the blue apart from each other. Okay, now we got to go back, clean that brush out. Okay, tap it a little. Okay, I don't see any color coming off. All right, now I'm going to come to the blue. Okay, now it's getting dark, so I want good, thick color. With watercolors, the more water you add, the lighter the color is. The less water, the darker the color is going to be. So I want a nice, boy, that's a pretty blue. It's going to be a nice darkening sky, because you know the Bible tells us that when Jesus died on the cross, it got very dark outside. So we're seeing that darkness here. I'm going to bring that blue right down here to the edge of the red. Okay. Now I'm going to dry that out, or not dry it out, I'm going to wash my brush out. Now I'm going to dry it out. See, there was a little blue that came off. I want to make sure that's all out, because I want to touch down into this yellow a little bit, and if I've got blue in there, I've got a green sky, and I don't want that. I'm going to just take my brush and just very lightly bring it across, come back, wash out again. Okay, check the brush, it's clean, blot it out. You come up here into the red and the blue, a little bit of that. And now comes the fun part. I'm going to actually pick my paper up, and I'm going to twist it around a little bit and let those colors just kind of bleed naturally into each other. Okay, you don't have to do it a whole lot. And then I'm going to go around the edge just very carefully and soak up a little bit of that excess water. Now, at this point, we want to dry our paper. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. You can go away and wait for a half hour or so while your paper dries. What I usually use is I'll use a blow dryer. So if mom or an older sister are willing to help you, then get that blow dryer, blow that paper until it's completely dry. It's going to curl. Just flip it over, dry it on the other side. It should flatten out nicely for you. So once you're happy with your sky, go ahead and dry the paper out, and then we'll come back and do the last part of our picture, which is the black light. All right, we've got our paper dry now, and so we're ready for the last part of the picture. And this is the most fun part. This is where we're going to put a black light, invisible highlight in. It's not totally invisible. You can see the crayon a little bit, but because of the colors that we used, it's still not very easy to see. So this is a way to sort of have an invisible picture that when you turn on a black light, it's going to just change the whole thing. And again, you can have as much fun as you want to with this. I'm going to be kind of reserved in how I do it, but I'm going to show you how I highlight. I want to think of where my light is coming from, and because this is a sunset behind the hill, the light, the sun is going down, so the light is actually coming up and going to be hitting one side of the cross. We'll do this with all three crosses, and it's going to be highlighting just underneath the crossbars, okay? And that's going to make it look like the sun is shining up and hitting those crosses from below. So what I'm going to do for starters, I'm going to start on Jesus' cross, and I'm going to just go down the right side of the cross. And again, when you do this, it's kind of hard because you really can't see the crayon. Now, one little trick that helps me is, depending on where the lights are in the room, I can see kind of the shiny reaction of the wax in the crayon, so that helps me to see it even though it's almost invisible. Now I'm going to come underneath the crossbar. I'm not going to draw it all the way across, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from one side right to the middle, and I'm going to go to the other side, come in from the outside right to the middle, okay? And then I'm going to come on the right side at the very end of the crossbar, and I'm going to come up just a little bit. And that's going to, again, show that light hitting from one side. Now let's go over to the cross on the right and do the same thing. I'm going to go down the right side. I'm going to stop when I get to the crossbar, skip down, and then I'm going to go all the rest of the way down, and then I'm going to draw underneath each crossbar. Okay, and then I'm going to do just a little bit on the end, on the right side of that one. Now let's go over to this one here. And I'm going to come down the right side, I'm going to come underneath, and then just on the right end. Now the other thing that I want to do is I want to put some highlights on my rocks here because we've got a rocky hill, Calvary, and so I'm going to come in, and sometimes you may just want to go along the entire line, or you may just want to do like I did with the crosses, just put highlights in certain places. And that's kind of your choice as to what you'd like to do. Remember, this is your picture, and you want to have fun with it. And the other thing is, even though you can't see exactly what you're doing because the crayon blends so well with the watercolors, you're not going to have problems putting too much on because the black light is the fun part of the picture. All right, have you finished? We have had a lot of fun putting this together, and to me the black light part is the best part because that's when we take one picture and almost magically transform it into a different picture. And that you can't do that too often with pictures. This is one thing that's really a lot of fun. So now we've got our black light crayon on there, and let's go take it and see what it looks like with the black light on. Now if you have your black light at home, you're going to want to get into a room where you can get most of the lights out. It needs to be a pretty dark room for you to see the black light working. So we're going to turn the lights out and turn the black light on and see what our three crosses look like. All right, now we can see that we have a nice reflection from the sun coming behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with my black light crayon, and I'm just going to go back down that side again, make that a little bit brighter there so we can see the whole cross. And so this is a great drawing or a great painting to do for Easter. If you want to make a present for somebody, just a reminder to them that that sun went down on that very sad Friday, but 3 days later, Jesus came out of that tomb alive. I'm Jim Pence. Join me again for the joy of art.